Hello, my name is Matthew Nelson and I'm going to be talking about a product called Fusion Access, which we've developed to enable people to open up their current databases to accept SDMX queries for data in a very quick and simple way. Now, out of the box, Fusion Access is pointing to flat files, so it's pointing to data files and structure files. But in this demo, we'll be changing this to point to a data source. So what I've done is I've launched the application, I've gone to Fusion Access index.html page, and this is what I'm presented with. I am presented with a very simple form, and this form facilitates me in generating a simple REST URL for data. So this step 2 is asking me which data flow I would like to query. Here I've chosen effective exchange rates, and step 1 asks me what format I want the response back in. So I can choose generic, and it's generated me a very simple sort of demo URL to get this data. So if I click on this, then I've got the data for the effective exchange rates coming back in generic 2.1. If I choose structure specific 2.1 and click the same link, it's now coming back as structure specific. And you can see that the detail has been set to series keys only. If I wanted to bring back the observations as well, the first thing I would do is probably filter out a few of these series. So I'll put Q, which is frequency is quarterly, and I'll take currency is Z68, and I'll do another currency Z65. I'll take off the detail parameter, so bring back everything. And there we can see we have series which now match this criteria that's been selected up here. So this is the end point. This is the bit that we want to see, but we want this to be pointing to a data source rather than flat files. So let's take a look at the application. Okay, if I close everything and just collapse the project, what we'll do is we'll start from the top. We're presented with source main resources. If we go into here, we have a properties file, and this properties file is what we will be manipulating in order to point to different sources. At the moment it's set to get the data from a data file, and it's set to get the structures from a structure file. There's an additional structure location which tells us where the structure file is, and this is under source test resources, which is here, DSD, which is here, sample structures, which is this file here. Now, we don't get this for data file, and this is because the data may come from more than one file. So the documentation up here, it says data file uses the file SDMX dataset. If we copy that text, do Control-Shift-T, we can open up this class, and we can link with the editor here, and we can see where this class lives in the code base. It's under the file retrieval package. And we can see that there's a method called getDataLocation, and what this does is it takes the data flow ID from the query, and then it uses that to construct a URI, and this comes from source test resources data, which is up here, and then the dataflow ID.xml. So you can see, depending on which data flow I've chosen, would depend on the file which got queried. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to point we'll do the structures first because this is very simple. We decide that we want to get the structures from a structure repository, say for example the registry. So we just change that text to registry, and we just uncomment the location of our REST interface. And I think I've actually set up, if I copy this URL, there should be a registry running. Yes, there is. If I remove this part of the URL, I can view the structures in the registry. You can see here that we have two data flows for agency MT, alpha and beta. And if we take a look at the structures and view these in more detail, we'll click on data flows, they point to this data structure called MT employment. So if I go back to the application, if I was to stop the server now and restart the server, what you would find is the home page will now be updated to be viewing the new data flows, I'll go Fusion Access index.html, alpha and beta. So that's now coming from my registry. And of course I've not hooked the data up, so what will happen if I queried for one of these is I would get some kind of an error. I'd get no data. Okay. So let's stop the server. Now what we want to do is we want to get the data from a location other than a data file. And there's three choices up here. There's streaming data source, data file, which is what we've got, or default. Now, in order to get data, we need to provide an implementation of this interface here, which is going to be loaded down. Okay, which is the simple SDMX simple data retrieval manager, and this contains a single method, get data. You get the data query object and the data writer engine on this interface. Now default is just a default implementation of this method. You get nothing given to you, you just get an implementation that looks like this, and you can do whatever you want with the data query in order to get your data, and you can use the data writer engine to write the response. But what I'm going to be demoing is the streaming data source. Now with the streaming data source, what you get is you get to implement two methods. The first one is the SQL query builder class, and there's a method on here called build, which takes the data query and returns a user query. Now the user query is just an object which has been created to facilitate in constructing some kind of SQL. So you can append SQL like this, select all from, and then you can append more SQL. Maybe this is the table name is your key family ID. Key family is the same thing as a data structure definition. So select all from BISEER, whatever the key family ID is, and then you can put where statements in. And this class here has all the loops in through the data query. It loops through the data providers, it loops through the selections the user's made, but it doesn't do anything with these parameters. So say for example you wanted to append some SQL to attach on some code selections, which is this bit here. This is the code selections the user's made, so they've decided to go for currency Z05. You could put a where statement in, and you could say where dimension ID, which would be your selected dimension, maybe this is currency, and then the selection either has a single value where you'd probably put an equals parameter in, and then you can either just put the selected value in here. So say for example I take the query I take the selection and I get the value. So this would now read where the currency is equal to Z08, or I could put a parameter in here, and then I can take the query and add a parameter, which would be my selection dot get value. This would be the better way to do it because it prevents SQL injection attacks, and you should find that you get better performance for similar queries that are processed because the query string remains consistent. So we've added this facility in to just put a question mark in, which is a placeholder, and then add a query parameter for that placeholder. So if you wanted to do multiple selections, what you would probably do is you'd put where the dimension ID is in, and then you would close off the bracket, and then what you'd probably do is something like that, and you'd put some commas in the relevant places. So this is showing how you can simply construct a piece of SQL that's relevant for your own database. There's additional filters here, date from and date to, And there's some additional detail which you could filter by down here. This isn't, you don't need to implement this at this stage here. This has just been put here as a placeholder. And likewise, the data providers, well, if you have no real concept of storing the data provider in your database, then you can just return for all data providers and ignore this step here. This is the most important step, and these steps, because these are the code selections and date filters. So that implements the query builder, and then you need to provide implementation code for the result set extractor. So what's happened once you built the query, it gets executed automatically for you, and then for every single row that comes back from the database, this method gets called. And this allows the database to stream the data out without bringing back the entire result set in one big object, which could potentially exceed memory limitations. So what we've used is this row callback handler, and what you'll find is for every row that comes back, this method is called automatically, and you just need to provide an implementation. So there's a very good example up here of how you might do that. You might take the columns out of your response, say for example country, age, sex, time and value, and then what you may do is you have access to the data writer engine, and this class here is responsible for actually writing the relevant SDMX. And in this instance, you don't know what's actually being written. You don't know whether it's compact data or generic data or structure specific data. You just know that there's a concept of a new series, and you know there's a concept of some kind of a series key, so you can write the series key like this. You can add attributes to the series by saying data writer engine dot write attribute value, and you can give it attributes. Obsconf is a. This is obviously hard coded that bit in, and then for every series you have a concept of adding or writing observations, and you can either just put it in the observation like this. So this could be 2001, for example, and the value is 82. Or you can pass a date in, and if you pass a date in, right observation. So if we put the obs time in and we give the obs value of 82, then we need to provide an additional time format to tell us whether it's yearly data, hourly data, monthly data, and the data writer engine will format the date in the SDMX specific way for that particular time format. So that's really how to provide an implementation for the data side. And what you should find when you've done that is you can start up the server, and then suddenly this link here will actually work. So I hope this demonstrates how quickly and simple it is to open up your own database to accept SDMX queries and return response in a variety of formats. Thank you for listening.